tried to warn them. They didn't listen.
Yeah!
Every week, the Hoffman Show goes into the belly of the beast.
We read those comments, baby.
Never read the comments.
We cut up the show into on-demand segments for you, which we air on YouTube at the Team 980 and at Craig Hoffman. You leave your comments, we read them, then you leave comments on that. And then the next week, you get the point. It's Never Read the Comments. Anthony, brought to you by...
Nobody.
But if you want to, shoot us an email or something. All right, let's get into it. Starting with our mock draft reaction, and specifically the debate around whether Washington should trade up for a tackle. So we, last Friday, did a mock draft where we did a 3-round mock draft where we picked just for the Commanders. And then we did kind of an alternate scenario where we redid the first part of the draft and we did trade up. And so let's read some of the old fade back off of that. I think if they can move back into round 1 to get Mims, that would be worth it just because the upside is so high. I'm not sure they would move for any of the others. I think getting someone like Paul with 36 or 40 would be a good option as well. That to me is kind of where I'm at. Lefty Costa, $18.99. Get the older left tackle from Green Bay. I know he has an injury history, but hopefully he can get the job done while we train a new draftee. David Bakhtiari. I think that is an interesting one. Scott says, if Fashanu or Mims is available at 18, I say pull the trigger, but we'll just have to wait and see. I'm down for whatever AP, DQ, Josh Harris company wants to do. I'm here for it. We haven't won in 32 years. LFG. HTTC. Those are the two that I think are interesting. I think Fashanu is the higher graded prospect on most people's boards, which means you're probably going to have to trade up farther to get him. But is it worth just waiting and giving up less for Mims because he could wind up being the better player? And to me, the best case scenario, the most likely scenario for Washington to ultimately trade up is Mims at like 20, if somehow he gets past Dallas. And now we're talking about trading up to 25, 26, where you're not having to give up third and a fourth, right? You're maybe giving up, second and a third. Certainly not 2 seconds. But if you can get to where you're giving up a second, a fifth, and a sixth, right? So maybe it's 3 for 2 and you get 28 and I don't know what the Bills are at 28 or the Bucks at 26. And their fourth rounder, and you go 3 for 2, and you give up a 2, a 5, and a 6 for a 1 and a 4, or a 1 and maybe their fifth, or something. I don't know. I don't know what the picks are because I don't have the Bucks picks in front of me. But it looks something like that, and you don't have to give up another top 100 pick. That is, to me, when it's 100% worth it. If you can get Mims, and frankly, if you can get Guyton at that point, I would heavily consider it. You have to kind of look at the board and say, hey, is he going to go here? Because there's other teams that might aggressively be looking to trade back in. Just does a Carolina who's got 33 and 39 say, like, we can give up a fifth or a sixth to go up 3 or 4 spots and go get a tackle. They're actually more set on the O-line than they probably are anywhere else. But, like, there are teams that could be doing what, like, just because Washington's talking about doing it doesn't mean they're not going to have competition, I guess is the point. So I think that if you can get Guyton late 20s, Mims mid 20s, Fashanu early 20s, then it becomes a no-brainer. If you have to think about it real hard, it's probably not worth it. Williams says on Mock Draft 3.0, seems like a pattern is forming that 9 to 12 tackles will go before we pick at 36. Trading up for Mims if he hits 21 plus is probably a good move. Contrarily, cornerbacks and wide receivers will likely fall a bit, making that left tackle choice really costly. Kool-Aid McKinstry and Troy Franklin and A.D. Mitchell could very well be available at 36, 40 and no viable tackles. I'd be ecstatic with McKinstry and Franklin / Mitchell / Leggett, but the fan base might revolt. Another option is to trade next year's first for a late first to get Mims and keep both seconds if this year's draft is particularly strong. I will say this. I agree with a lot of what Williams said. I hate the last part. Hate it. Do not trade your future first round pick. you could be really bad this year. Hopefully not. Hopefully they're better than they were last year off coaching alone. Nevertheless, the fact that I think their talent defensively is significantly better across the board. Offensively, I think they've gotten better on the O-line. Like, we'll see. It's all going to come down to quarterback play and game planning, play calling. But there is one of the things that we talked about earlier in the week with Alec Lewis from The Athletic is that teams undervalue future picks. If anything, like, trade 36 for someone's future first. Don't trade your future first. That is a terrible, terrible idea. Paul Sherman, 184. Read this. I'm going to read this comment non-snarkily just to make a quick point for anybody that may be looking at these drafts. The trade that we made, Ant, for the Vikings trading up, not to mention some others. Trade seems awful light based off past deals. It seems like when trade scenarios with us moving, it costs much more for one spot. What did we give up for the move for RG3? One thing that I will note is we can only trade 2 years into the future, or 1 year into the future, 24 and 25, on PFF Simulator, which is the one that we use. So sometimes we make a deal and we just kind of say, hey, there's probably a 2025 or 2026 pick in here, and we can't actually include it, but their simulator allows us to do it. And it's really about the picks that we're actually going to make in that mock. So when I'm trading, like, I don't really care about future first in terms of the simulator because we're not going to simulate next year's draft. As long as we can get through whether it's a 1, a 2, or a 3-round mock with the picks in the right places, that's all I care about in terms of what we do when doing these mock drafts live on the radio. We don't have time to get out the calculator, consult the GM, etc. As for the RG3 part of this, though, and like, okay, well, what about the actual trades when we're talking about these high picks? When you move up in the top 3, top 5, it's way more expensive. It's about how far you move and how high you're going. The higher you get, the more expensive the price. So yes, Washington gave up as a base 3 first-rounders plus some other stuff. And that's because they were going to the number 2 pick. If Minnesota wants to get to number 2 to take whoever ahead of Washington in terms of quarterback, and Adam Peters said today that they're probably not doing this, but just hypothetically, it starts with 11, 23 this year, 25 in their first rounder next year, and then it's what do you get on top of that? So yeah, some of these trades that we simulate might be a little light. Some of these trades that are discussed might feel a little light, but it's if you're comparing it to a second pick versus, say, when Anthony traded up to number 5 in mock draft 3.0 for the Chargers, and at number 5, you might not have to give up 3 first rounders. You might be able to get away with 2 plus a first. Plus a future second or whatever we ultimately wound up doing. Let's see. What else do we got in this week's edition of Never Read the Comments? Some definitely interesting comments on our segment from last week and talking about Jayden Daniels, or sorry, not Jayden Daniels, Drake Maye versus JJ McCarthy and the quarterback archetypes. I was surprised. Remember, we termed it as Justin Herbert light or Kirk Cousins plus. Which do you think got more votes?
Justin Herbert.
That's what I thought was going to happen. People were pleasantly surprising.
Oh, so we got a lot of secret Kirk fans out there?
I think people just realized the question.
Oh.
Now, of course, it depends on what you actually think of Drake Maye versus JJ McCarthy. But, Bruin Ranger 13, absolutely Cousins plus. I'm definitely down with JJ. Resonant Freck, whatever that means. 528, definitely Cousins plus. Raymond Smith, give me Kirk plus all day. Kirk Cousins plus is a dream QB. Like, that is what you want, right? Is you want a guy with great processing ability, but maybe a little bit more athleticism, a little bit more toughness. Now, this is where it gets fun, though, because people's answer probably changes depending on who they think that we're talking about. Mr. Thud 03, give me Cousins plus if we're talking from pure football ability standpoint, then give me Kirk plus. He's consistently a top 10 QB. If Jayden turns out to be a baller and a gamer, especially in big-time moments, that's even better. And then someone responds, they're talking about JJ McCarthy, not Daniels. How do you think JD is Cousins plus? I'm not even the biggest fan of JJ, but that's clearly who they're referring to. And then the original person's like, for the record, I misunderstood and thought they were telling about Jayden Daniels. However, if they're asking me, do I want Justin Herbert light or Kirk Cousins plus, I'll take Kirk Cousins plus. Doesn't mean that I think they're alike. So either way, all the QBs, whichever we pick, I prefer Kirk plus. So literally everyone was pretty much like, I want Kirk plus, which is the right answer, by the way. Now, the question that, of course, Adam Peters has to answer is J.J. McCarthy actually Kirk plus, and is Drake Maye actually Justin Herbert light? Like, I can't remember who the analyst even was at this point that suggested those things. Or is Drake Maye like Justin Herbert light in some areas, but way better in others, his creative playmaking and things like that? And is J.J. McCarthy not as sharp as Kirk is from a decision-making standpoint? And thus, yes, he's got a little bit better arm and more athleticism, but he's not actually that guy. And that's on Peters and the scouts to ultimately to figure out, you know?
Nah, for sure.
All right, what else do we got? Again, you can leave your comments at Craig Hoffman. This one was just funny to me. Carlos comment. One thing that's happened a lot, Ant, is we're producing more shorts from the show. So on YouTube, it's kind of like Reels or TikTok. The short vertical videos, 60 seconds long, and we're producing more of those for the show at Craig Hoffman, which is great because a lot of new people are finding the content, and it's just that sometimes people think they know everything about what we say on the show from a 60-second short. You can imagine that goes exactly as planned at all times, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So literally yesterday, no, I take that back. 1 hour ago.
Oh, wow.
Carlos Allen, 4616. You see, this is going back to the short we made off of Kurt Warner being on the show, or being on Sheehan's show, and then me reacting and kind of talking about some of what Kurt said about Jayden Daniels. You seem to find every reason to not pick JD. You rarely highlight negatives from your pick, Maye. Just say that's your guy and not try to make it seem like you're impartial. Anthony, we did mock draft 3.0 yesterday. I picked for the Commanders. Who did I pick?
Jayden Daniels.
Why do people do this to themselves?
I don't know. Isn't also that real from like weeks ago?
The algorithm, man. It's a weird place.
Yeah. That
algorithm. Also, in the I can't believe they said this on the internet. Thank God they don't use the real name department. This one cracked me up quite a bit. King Dre 1017 on our interview with Mark Ross, the former Giants executive who's now with the NFL Network, who had very interesting thoughts on this quarterback discussion. He goes, talking to a guy that's in the same division won't give their honest opinion. He spelled "their" wrong. Used the wrong one. Won't give their honest opinion on who we should take because they don't want us to kick their ass 2 times a year. He doesn't work there anymore, King Dre. He works at a television network. They probably fired him, in fact, because that's how most executives wind up not being with clubs anymore. The internet's a wild place, Ant.
It's a zoo. It is a zoo.
It is a wild, wild place. This is a little bit of a long comment, but I thought it was really interesting because Ross about Daniels. He made his whole theory of the case was essentially that quarterbacks are the best guy. The quarterbacks that work out in the NFL are the best guys on the field, and it's obvious. You don't overthink it. You get in trouble when all of a sudden you convince yourself Mitch Trubisky is the number 2 pick. Because, when was Mitch Trubisky ever that great in college? And his thing with Jayden Daniels is, watch the tape in 2023, and that dude is the best player, which is why he won the Heisman Trophy. The stats are amazing and all of that stuff. And when he says it with a conviction that you're like, damn, that is convincing. That is compelling. Well, Alicia Fisher, 4889, says, wholeheartedly disagree with the point about good quarterbacks having been good quarterbacks their whole life. Compared to the public average of what a normal person trying to play quarterback compared to college NFL players, of course, they're always going to be better. But there are so many prospects that have been projects that worked out and a lot of good college QBs that haven't. Just to name a few in the last few years that were quote-unquote good, safe prospects. Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen, Trubisky, Mac Jones, etc. QBs from those drafts that were projects and taken later in their respective drafts were Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, Jalen Hurts, Jordan Love. Even Tom Brady was a project 6th-round pick, and Aaron Rodgers was a late 1st-round pick because he was a developmental prospect, and the Niners took Alex Smith instead. No disrespect, but Mark Ross was blessed being around a franchise who was chosen by a Manning brother and Eli, who was a good college QB who won in big moments, and the NFL was different back then. Prospects are not a guaranteed thing. You take the guys that fit and have a ceiling. You are aiming high for football play, not just the guy who is a good college QB who is safe. Now, I would point out that a guy like Lamar Jackson probably proves Mark's point more than disproves it. He was a interesting, to think about NFL prospect. But Ant, you were at Cuse when Lamar was there. Were you at that game in the Dome?
I was indeed. I saw him. I was in the end zone where he hurdled my guy, Deli Dub Zero.
Ugh.
Yeah.
I remember watching that game on TV being like, that's the best football player I've ever seen in my whole life.
It was crazy.
Well, that was Lamar Jackson's coming out party. It was a Friday night at the then Carrier Dome against Syracuse. And Lamar in college was the best player on the field all the time. Patrick Mahomes was the best player on the field. And I think that is Mark's point, is that sometimes guys that become questionable prospects for whatever reason were the best player in college, and we find excuses to say that they weren't actually that, right? That Mahomes, he's a crazy man, wild man. And he is. But he's also the best player. His stats were insane. So, what my question would be then is when you look at Drake Maye often was the best player on the field. The problem is it's an 11-man game, and the other 10 that he was playing with were not very good. Where Jayden was often the best player on the field, and that was enhanced by the fact that and now people are going to get mad and think I'm hating on Jayden again, but this is kind of the point. Jayden was simultaneously often the best player on the field. If he wasn't, it was Malik Neighbors, who he had to get the ball to and did so expertly. And the stats and the numbers and everything that becomes an easier evaluation shows it because the production is there. And I guess that's kind of the point, is somewhere in between this comment and what Ross said, there is a truth that production isn't everything, that there is projection involved here. And the idea that you can just be who's the best player in college is oversimplifying it. I think Mark's point was really interesting. I just don't fully agree with it when you look at someone like a Josh Allen, who's a sub 60% completion guy at Wyoming and still turned out to be one of the best 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. So clearly there's more to it. And I think the part that puzzled me the most about that interview, and I think Mark's a smart guy. I'd have him on again. But I'd asked him about kind of the nature nurture thing. And he was basically I think the guys are going to bust. The guys who are going to bust are going to bust. The guys who are going to be good are going to be good. And the guys who are going to be in the middle are going to be in the middle. I just don't think that's true. I think that you can win with and get really good production out of guys who would otherwise not go anywhere in the league based off the circumstances. I don't think Brock Purdy is Brock Purdy at 28 of the 32 NFL franchises. He went to the right one, and he's going to be a Pro Bowler for the next decade, possibly. Meanwhile, if Andrew Luck was scheme-proof, Peyton was scheme-proof, and Cam was to an extent scheme-proof for a while, but after watching what they did with the quarterbacks here the last 4 years, what if Cam had went to not Ron Rivera in Carolina? Would he have won multiple MVPs? Did we see one of the, if we play Cam's career 10 times, did you see the second or third worst version of it? Circumstances matter a lot, how you set people up to succeed. Allowing Josh Allen, if Josh Allen goes somewhere where he's given the keys to the car immediately, he would have crashed. Instead, he was there was someone next to him doing the the student driver brake deal. And that allowed him to ultimately be the point where he can drive a Ferrari and put up some pretty good lap times. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. That is never read the comments. You can leave yours where we do, in fact, read them at Craig Hoffman and at the Team 980 on all of our on-demand content.
What's up, kiddos? It's your boy Clinton Yates from ESPN. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Tell your mama I said what's up.